Our topic tonight is Charles Rosenberger. Charles Rosenberger became SGIG in October of 1959, and I became a 32nd degree Mason less than 2 years later. For the next 20 years, he was, in my eyes, king of the mountain, and I was a lowly serf working in the fields. This was my perception of the handsome, dignified, yet cordial man named Charles Paul Rosenberger. I can only remember being in his presence once. I was in a group of men during a reunion, and Bill Young introduced him to me. It was not just a casual handshake. He made me feel important with some appropriate remark. If he'd gone into politics, I know he could have been governor. I know he was just plain Charlie or Rosie to those who were close to him, but this was my remembrance of him. We will now take a look at his life as he was the head man when a lot of changes took place that changed Scottish Rite Masonry in Oklahoma, and are still a part of the way we do business. Brother Rosenberger was born in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania in 1899. Now, what happened in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania?
Groundhog Day.
Punxsutawney is famous for its groundhog activities, that is, predicting the length of winter every February the 2nd. I looked this up, and the legend of the groundhog began the year that he was born. So after graduating from high school, Rosenberger got a job with the Sun Oil Company refinery that was close there to his home, and was later transferred to their main office in Philadelphia. A couple of years later, he was called to service in the Navy during World War I. He was assigned to a group of ships whose duty was submarine hunting. After the war, he returned to Sun Oil, who reassigned him to their Tulsa headquarters in 1922, where he worked for the next 8 years. At the age of 31, in 1930, he organized and became the president of the Majestic Oil and Refining that was engaged in the manufacture and distribution of automotive and industrial oils. He remained president of Majestic Oil until he retired in 1969. His civic and charitable activities were pretty much what we have seen with all of the other leaders. For sake of time, I won't go into them, but he was very active in the social and civic life of the community of Tulsa. It's interesting to me that he was a Presbyterian, and as I've made these talks, 5 of the 7 former SGIGs were members of that particular denomination. In Tulsa, in 1925, he met and married a lady named Bobby Haskins. They had 2 children, Mariana Jane and Charles Haskins Rosenberger. I never met Mariana Jane, but through Masonry, I knew young Charles. Young Charles loved to party and generally raise hell. I won't go any further for fear of incriminating myself. Now let me do a quick run through on his Masonic career. He arrived in Tulsa, as I mentioned, in 1922, married in 1925, and began his Blue Lodge work in 1927 in Tulsa. His leadership skills were discovered quickly, and he served as worshipful master in 1932. He then went through the chapter, council, and commandery degrees of the York Rite in Tulsa. His next Masonic experience was the Scottish Rite, which took place in Tulsa. And here's how it happened. In April of 1930, the Masonic Temple in McAlester was under construction. So the spring reunion was moved to Tulsa, and one of the 195 candidates was Charles P. Rosenberger. So it's an unusual situation. Makes you wonder, if the Scottish Rite had not come to Tulsa, would he have ever become a member? Tulsa and Rosenberger seem to go together. That will continue to play out as we continue the talk. He became quite active in the Scottish Rite. He received the rank and decoration of KCCH in 1933 and received his 33rd degree in 1939. These were during the tough years of the Depression, so you know what was going on then. He organized the first Scottish Rite Club in Tulsa and served as president. During the 1950s, he was working with and pushing General Key, the presiding SGIG, to create a Scottish Rite Valley in Tulsa. That finally happened when letters temporary were granted in 1958. Now listen to this. This is unbelievable. The first Tulsa Scottish Rite class, the first reunion and class that they had there under difficult circumstances, was held in May of 1958, and they had 531 candidates under makeshift conditions. That is amazing to me. It just goes to show that with great enthusiasm and leadership, amazing things can get done. For the next 12 years, the reunions were held and the degrees were performed in the Will Rogers High School auditorium and later in the Memorial High School. Initially, Rosenberger was the coordinator of degrees. He had the responsibility for acquiring the necessary regalia and equipment and costumes. The stage props were stored in trailers and then moved to the site on reunion days. He developed the original degree teams. He did all of this in Tulsa. As mentioned, Rosenberger had tremendous support from all of the Tulsa members who had demitted from the McAlester and Guthrie consistories. By the end of the Tulsa Valley's first year, which was 1958, over 1,000 new Scottish Rite members were created, and the planner, architect, and chief bottle washer was Mr. Tulsa, Charles Rosenberger. On January the 15th of the next year, 1959, General Key died, and Charles Rosenberger was named as the new deputy. He became an active member of the Supreme Council with the title of SGIG in October of that year. Just a quick finish about the Tulsa Valley. It continued on amazingly well in temporary quarters for the next 12 years. They bought very expensive land on Skelly Drive and built a building which I refuse to call a temple. That is, when compared to McAlester and Guthrie. It was very definitely more efficient and served its purpose quite well. The Masonic Center was completed there in Tulsa in 1970 with a sizable debt. If the membership would have continued rising or even remained constant, Tulsa probably would have been okay financially. This was not the case, as they began the same membership decrease in the 1970s as all other valleys. In 2007, they had to sell the building. To their credit, they seem to be doing reasonably well in their current location, a former church building. I do not know which of the two original valleys lost the most membership to Tulsa. However, I suspect that it was McAlester. There were some bad feelings when a degree team lost half of its actors and other similar situations because of the move of members to Tulsa. I found some membership stats that are quite revealing to me. These figures are as of 1979, 20 years after Tulsa was begun. Here's the figures. Guthrie, 13,165 members. Tulsa, 8,303, after an original base of 4,500. McAlester, 7,850. In the first 20 years, the decision to add a third valley was probably a good decision. However, in the long perspective, perhaps not. But who could have predicted that nationwide, the southern jurisdiction's membership would fall every year from 1975 high? Back to our subject matter, that is Charles P. Rosenberger. During his 22-year reign as SGIG, tremendous changes were made in the power structure of Scottish Rite Masonry, and many new ways of operating were instituted. He required our valleys to set up a charitable and educational foundation. In 1966, the Advisory Conference system of government was installed. This required the terms of the masters of the 4 lodges to be changed from 3-year renewable terms to a 1-year renewable. During this 1-year term, they automatically became a member of the Advisory Conference, along with 5 men appointed by the SGIG. In essence, this reinforced the power of the SGIG and diminished the authority of the masters. Another major activity was required. Brother Rosenberger directed that a childhood language disorders clinic be established, staffed, and managed by each valley. This took place. However, the McAlester Clinic was discontinued by SGIG Million due to finances, but primarily the inability to hire certified clinicians. That changed 10 years later in 2003 when SGIG Joe Jennings directed the McAlester Clinic to resume business. As mentioned, Inspector Rosenberger held this position for 22 years, which makes this the longest tenure of any Oklahoma SGIG. From all I have heard, I read, and the people that I have talked to, notwithstanding all his changes and improvements, it seems that he will be remembered most for his ability to create friends in all levels of society. The Supreme Council, as per any lodge, has its own officers, and Brother Rosenberger attained the highest level of any person from Oklahoma. On the valley level, he knew stagehands, actors, cooks, and everyone who wore a Scottish Rite hat. Let me quote now a few sentences that I have taken from Bob Davis's book, talking about Rosenberger. Quote, "He embraced the fellowship of Masonry and looked forward to being with his friends at all levels. It has been said that no one ever enjoyed fellowship more than Charles Rosenberger. He was happiest when he was with people. He personified dignity, poise, and cordiality." End of quote. Quite a great compliment. Illustrious brother Charles Rosenberger died September 21st, 1981, at the age of 81. Funeral services were held in the Scottish Rite Masonic Center in Tulsa. This concludes the story of Oklahoma's 8th Sovereign Grand Inspector General. I will now, in the next few minutes, relate to you the unusual circumstances of the appointment of the 9th Oklahoma SGIG to replace Charles Rosenberger. I have taken a section out of a talk that I gave in November of 2012, which describes this unusual situation. If you heard that talk, I apologize. However, after 3 years, you may have forgotten some of the details. This activity took place in the fall of 1981 and the first few months of 82. At this time, illustrious Henry Clausen was serving as the Sovereign Grand Commander of the Southern Jurisdiction of Scottish Rite Masonry in Washington, D.C. Shortly after Rosenberger's death, Clausen appointed a seemingly well-respected Oklahoma Mason as the replacement. As is normal, he was given the entry-level position of Deputy of the Supreme Council for Oklahoma. This appointment was not well received by a few, but very influential Scottish Rite leaders. They sought out the help of the sitting Grand Master of Oklahoma, who was Wilson Haney. Most of us knew him as Slim, as he was tall and slim of build, but he certainly had a strong resolution. Haney agreed with the local leaders and contacted Grand Commander Clausen, requesting him to withdraw the appointment. Clausen refused, feeling that his authority was being questioned and he wasn't accustomed to being questioned. This is when the authority of two autonomous Masonic leaders clashed. The power struggle was on. Grand Master Haney then issued the following edict, dated November the 3rd, 1981, and he sent it to all lodges. Let me read it. It was called the Edict of the Grand Master, effective November the 3rd, 1981. Any activity in connection with Scottish Rite Masonry in Oklahoma by a Master Mason is prohibited. The above edict refers to Scottish Rite activities such as reunions, societies, action groups, and so forth, not membership in the Scottish Rite. Therefore, Scottish Rite Masons may continue to carry their cards. So, everything stopped. The Oklahoma Scottish Rite temples were closed, employees were sent home, and Oklahoma Scottish Rite Masonry was just basically shut down. Because you have to be a Master Mason to become a member of the Scottish Rite, and he was saying that all Master Masons were prohibited from participating in Scottish Rite activities. So, 2 weeks later, after conferring in detail with the 3 advisory conferences in Oklahoma, Grand Commander Clausen accepted the resignation of his appointee, and then on November the 16th, 1981, appointed his Secretary General to an additional duty as being the SGIG of Oklahoma. His name was C. Fred Kleinknecht. And of course, as you all know that name, he went from his position of Secretary General into the Sovereign Grand Commander's position later on. But while he was Secretary General, he was given the position as SGIG of Oklahoma. Not a deputy to start with. He was appointed SGIG directly by the Sovereign Grand Commander. Kleinknecht held this position of representing Oklahoma to Supreme Council level then for almost 4 months. He did not relish this additional job, saying he had plenty on his plate as Secretary General. And I have a feeling that everybody remembers Kleinknecht because he came here, well, I don't know, perhaps he came here to McAlester when Paul Million was SGIG and met a lot of people and was an awful nice person. But he didn't relish the position. He was one of the few, I guess, that were ever appointed as SGIG that didn't relish the position. Therefore, thereafter, on December the 2nd, 1981, Grand Master Haney revoked his previous edict and the Scottish Rite was back in business in Oklahoma. In this instance, the Grand Lodge of Oklahoma proved superior to the House of the Temple. Thereafter, SGIG was also Secretary General Kleinknecht worked frantically with Oklahoma Scottish Rite leaders in an effort to find his replacement. Almost 4 months later, March the 8th, 1982, a new deputy of the Supreme Council for Oklahoma was appointed. His name was Frederick A. Dartery. Dartery was a federal judge, a general in the 45th Division, was well respected by all. He met with the general acceptance and was eventually invested with the full title of SGIG, serving for the next 4 years. He was then the 10th SGIG in Oklahoma history, counting Kleinknecht as the 9th. We've just closed the window on a 4-month unusual period of unrest in Oklahoma Masonic history. Let me say, I know the name of the unacceptable appointee, but I do not honestly know what the allegations against him were. They were never made public. So the answer to the question, has Oklahoma SGIG ever become a sovereign grand commander, is yes. As you all know, that Dawson died, his Secretary General, Fred Kleinknecht, was elevated to the grand commander. If there's a moral to this story, at least in my perspective, it is this: be careful who you place in line and eventually elect as the most worshipful Grand Master of our state, as he truly is the most important Mason and wields tremendous power. Next month, we will take a quick look at Brother Dartery and all of the remaining SGIGs up to 2010. Thank you.